Okay, I would like to call this meeting of the Los Alamitos Unified School District Board of Education to order. I believe you were breaking up, Andrew, but I believe you said we do not need to do roll call.
No, you will. We'll just follow the agenda.
Okay, we'll do roll call. Ms. Tina.
Mrs. Catulli.
Here.
Mrs. Russell.
Here.
Mr. Boyer.
Here.
Mrs. Davidson.
Here.
And Mrs. Hill.
Okay, that's not my dog.
It's
okay,
my dog.
Is there any community or staff participation? Okay, so hearing or seeing that there are none, then I would like to turn this meeting over right now to Dr. Pulver for an introduction.
Thank you, Madam President and esteemed members of the board. This is our first Zoom portion of a board meeting, so I hope that you can hear us. If you prefer, you can put your your audio on mute in case you have any noises in the background. Just when you speak during the workshop, you'll want to unmute yourself. But I want to thank you for coming today in this digital or virtual Zoom meeting. We will be doing, the public is available to also sit in and join on this workshop on a potential solar power purchase agreement project. As you all know, we passed our Measure G bond for $97 million. And one of the many items at one point when we were doing town hall meetings that some of the community and staff had asked is, would we ever be able to include some type of solar projects within the scope of the bond project? Once we knew that the threshold for the bond was $97 million and the variety of projects that we already have earmarked for those, we quickly learned that solar would not likely be an option that we would be able to yield through the bond at this time. And so back in November, I had the pleasure, all of you will probably remember, meeting Dr. David Verdugo, who helped with the superintendent search, also reached out to me to see if we had any interest in exploring solar. And I shared that we did. However, we were concerned about having the revenue in order to do so. And so he put me in touch with Mike Beverly, who is going to be presenting today to us, who works for PFMG, and in looking at a solar option that really could be zero cost to the district. In essence, we'll all oversimplify it, and then Michael and CJ will expand. But in essence, we are committed to buy our electricity through Edison, and by installing the solar at no cost to us, nor maintenance at any point to us, basically what we're doing is we're committing to buy the solar through this lease agreement first, which we believe we can be at a discounted rate than what, and there are a few options that will be able to lock in some of those rates. And then any remaining power that's not produced from the solar, we would then purchase from Edison. And so with that, and many of you had the opportunity to meet Mr. Beverly at the CSBA annual conference in December. So we've probably had, with Nancy and CJ and myself, probably about 4 meetings or so with PFMG. We also talked a little bit with Pacific West, who helped us with the battery. And really what you'll see in this presentation is really how solar and our battery backup that we've already initiated can really complement and potentially save up to $15 million over the life of 30 years through the district. That's making some assumptions on what the electricity rates will be between now and the next 30 years, but we certainly have historical averages. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to CJ, who will just briefly share a little bit more. And then Michael Beverly has a presentation that we can go through and answer any of the questions that you may have.
Okay, it's good, Madam President, honorable trustees. It's good to see everybody. It's been a long time. I hope you guys are all healthy and doing well. We've had the opportunity to work with Michael over the last several weeks and months, going over what solar would look like for Los Al, and really looking at some of the numbers and how we can see a benefit through a PPA agreement. And I would really like to just hand it over to Michael to give you more of the details and all the facts that are related to doing solar for Los Al. So Michael, go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you, CJ, and thank you, Dr. Pulver, for the nice introduction. Very nice to meet the board here at Los Alamitos, for those of you that I haven't met previously. And thank you very much for the time today to learn a little bit more about solar and the work we've been doing with the team here at Los Alamitos. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. And now I think, CJ, I think you were going to pull up the presentation. Is that up already?
It's not yet. We'll share the screen once it's ready.
Okay. Great.
You're going to want to
Perfect.
put it in presentation mode.
Okay. Well, good. Seems like it's up there. Can everybody see the presentation?
We're going
Okay.
to just wait to
Thank
get
you.
it.
Well, as I mentioned, my name's Mike Beverly. I'm with PFMG Solar. So we are a company with an office out at Huntington Beach that has come to focus on doing solar projects for school districts in California. So I'll go into some more detail here, but we've spent some time working with the staff here at Los Alamitos. We've pulled down your energy usage data to analyze your usage from SoCal Edison. We've visited each of your sites, and we've taken in a lot of feedback from the team at the district about goals of the solar project, as well as potential locations for some of the solar arrays. So I look forward to provide you with this information, and I look forward to your questions. So CJ, if you want to start us off, perfect, thank you. So PFMG Solar, we are the leading provider of solar for schools in Southern California. We're currently working at 31 school districts with a total of 329 different schools in Southern California with solar. As I mentioned, we are officed out of Huntington Beach, so we've got a local team here. And one of the reasons we've become so successful in this space is that we have a no change order policy. So for all of our projects, the price at which we contracted with the school district has been the price at which we have ultimately ended up providing energy. So all of the cost and the risk along with the solar project is on us to deliver you in the price that we're offering today. In addition to our experience, we have very strong references from all of our client districts. And in addition to that, given that we've worked with over 30 school districts, we've developed a pretty robust educational curriculum program that accompanies the solar project. So I'll go into some more detail about that, but we have curriculum at both the elementary school, middle school, and high school level that can bring some of the learning opportunities from the solar project into the classroom for students to take advantage of. With our experience working at schools, we've come to know the DSA quite well, the Division of State Architects, which is the group that governs school districts. And so we have a 100% success rate of closing out with DSA. So we see here on the slide, oh, if you could go back one, CJ, thank you. You can see here, this is a list of all the solar projects we've done for school districts in Southern California. Locally here in Orange County, we are currently working with Saddleback Valley Unified School District, Tustin Unified School District, where we completed a phase 1 a couple of years ago, and we're currently under construction at phase 2 for the remainder of their schools. And Fullerton School District, we are also under construction at all 20 of their schools right now. In addition to all the school districts that you can see there, we're also heavily involved in the public agency and municipal space. So we've done solar projects for the Port of Long Beach. We're under construction right now for the City of Long Beach, County of Orange, County of San Diego. So predominantly school solar projects is what most of the work we're doing, but we're also out there active in the municipal solar space as well. If you go to the next slide, CJ. So as Dr. Pulver mentioned, the way that we've delivered most of our solar projects is through what's called a power purchase agreement, or a PPA. And under a PPA, there's zero capital cost to the school district for the addition of solar on your sites. So all costs for the design, permitting, construction, and the ongoing maintenance and operations is provided by us. The only obligation that the school has under the contract is to buy energy that's produced from the solar arrays on your campus at the contracted rate. So under the PPA, what this means is you have fixed pricing for the entire term of the PPA agreement, which is up to 30 years. and you only pay for the energy that we actually produce from the arrays. So the power purchase agreement is a nice way for solar companies and school districts to work together, because we want to produce as much power as we can, because that's how we recoup the investment for the installation of the solar. And you guys want us to produce as much energy as we can, because that's how we produce the savings that improve the general fund and reduce your costs to Southern California Edison. Also, under a power purchase agreement, we use only top tier technology. As the owner of the system for the full term, it's important that all of the equipment there is expected to last the term of the agreement and produce and perform through the entire term as we've expected. So it's our responsibility to select the components and the technology that's going to last for the term and ensure maximum production from the system. In the event something does happen and that something breaks, then it's our responsibility to fix that or replace the equipment to get the system back up and operating in the way that we had proposed and had contracted with the district. At the end of the power purchase agreement, the district has 3 options. So the first option is that we can come in and remove the solar system at our cost. So that means pulling out steel columns that are in the parking lots and in the ground, removing conduits, and restoring the sites to how they were before we got there. So there's a lot of cost involved in doing that. So there's certainly an incentive on our part to try to reach a deal on the second or third options, which are either the district can purchase the system at the end of the contract at fair market value, or we can renew the contract and do another 30 years and continue the contract going forward. But the district has those options, and it puts the district in a good opportunity to negotiate a strong deal at the end of the term.
Mike, can you hear me?
Yes.
If at the end of this 30 years, if we decided that we didn't want the project at all, period, and we wanted you to remove it all from our sites, would you?
Yes. So that's the first option. If you guys don't want it, and whatever we're offering you to sell it to you or to renew the contract is not what you want, then we have an obligation and a requirement to remove all of our equipment and restore the site to how it was before we arrived.
Okay, I just want to make sure, because who knows what these solar panels are going to look like in 30 years, and if they'll be considered toxic waste. I just didn't know what our liability might be. Okay, thanks.
That's right. Yep, we are the owner of the system, so we have a responsibility to dispose of all of the equipment at the end of life. And I think one potential option would be at the end is we would pull off the panels that are there, replace them with new panels, and then extend the contract going forward. But again, all responsibilities on us to remove the equipment if that's what you decide.
May I ask one quick question? This is Diana Hill. I'm the backlit one. You said something about that if the system breaks or if there's a issue with the system, that it's your responsibility to fix it. What happens to us about getting electricity during that period of time? Because you said that part of our contract was that we had to purchase all the electricity through you. If the system's not working, how do we get electricity? Because we kind of need it for schools.
Yep. So you are still connected to Southern California Edison. So at times where the system is not producing as much energy as you're using on the site, then you guys are still pulling energy from Southern California Edison. In the event our system were to go down, then you would still have power uninterrupted from the utility. So you're still tied in there.
And if we're pulling that, we're not getting penalized for using that if it's an issue with your system, or if it's an issue with that you're not producing enough electricity for what we need.
Right, then you're paying power as you normally would from Southern California Edison, which would typically be at a higher rate than your solar bill. So because that's how we generate the savings. So you guys want us to produce energy so that you save money. And part of the contract that we have, there's a performance guarantee in there, where if we don't perform at a certain level of what we have shown you guys, then there's a penalty that we actually have to pay you for our underperformance. So like I mentioned before, we're fully incentivized to produce as much energy as we can, because that's the only way we have of collecting revenue. But even in the event that the system underperforms, then we're on the hook also to pay you guys a penalty to recoup some of the additional costs that you pay for.
Okay, and Mike, this is Meg. Catuli speaking. I have always thought that the solar panels themselves really only have a life of 15 to 20 years. And that you're talking about a 25 to 30 year agreement. So if at some point in the future, and we will not be on the board when this occurs, if we find that the solar arrays are not producing the electricity that we need, that it's going down in its production, do you guys come in at a certain point? Do we need to have this written down where you would replace them with newer solar panels?
So yeah, so first of all, yes, if we start to get to the point where we're underperforming and it's because of some sort of solar module issue, then our performance guarantee language still says either we have to fix the issue or we pay you a penalty. Now, what we've seen is a lot of the modules that we tend to use, or that we use, have 25 to 30 year warranties, and we expect the modules to last beyond that term, even if they're out of warranty. But our contract supersedes any warranty from the module. So it's on us to deliver the power under the contract, and all sort of warranty issues or technology issues, that falls back on us, and that's our responsibility. And that's part of why it's important that we select only the best technology, because if these modules go down after 10 or 15 years, there's still an additional 15 years of contract where we have a performance guarantee that we need to meet with the district. And so that's one of the reasons that we've seen school districts in particular prefer the PPA, is because all of that goes back onto the system owner, which is us, and the district is not responsible for that independently. But our expectation is that the modules will last the full term of 30 years, which is why we offer terms of up to 30 years.
Okay. And are you going to get to somewhere in the presentation talking about how much space you need to be able to create the amount of electricity that would be desirable for both of us?
Yeah, so what we've done is we've gone to each of your sites and worked with the staff to find locations for the arrays. We're typically trying to offset about 70 to 80% of the load at each of your sites, so that we're not overbuilt and we're accounting for future energy efficiency if you have that planned. So we have individual layouts for each site that are not in this presentation, but I think I could provide them in a follow-up if Dr. Pulver and Nancy and CJ think would like me to do that.
Yes, our thought at this time was to just educate the board to see if this was direction they wanted us to continue to spend any more time on. And then if so, we have had a few meetings that Mike has been able to work with us to take a look at possible locations at our 9 school sites, along with the district office here. And then, of course, even any decisions we make then, as we would roll this out, if we went to the site and the community and they preferred location B instead of location A, we could certainly make those adjustments. We tried to factor in some of the things that we already know about our community as well.
Yep, that's right. We definitely have found in working with different communities and different districts that locating the arrays in locations that are advantageous to the students as well as the community is really a key driver in the success of these projects. So we would definitely continue to work with the district and the team there to find the ideal locations.
Mike, I have one question before we move forward, and you'll get to it a little bit in terms of the savings later. But obviously, we have a lot of unknowns with schooling, with distance learning, and I'm hoping this is not the norm. But if it becomes a new norm for several years, the amount of energy we would need may decrease. Would the contract that we would eventually enter into, would it ever require us to purchase more energy than we actually consume? So let's say the cells are producing more energy, but suddenly our energy use is down. Are we locked into buying a set amount of energy from the company no matter what? And is that one of the risks?
Yeah, well, part of that is that the contract is for the district to purchase all of the energy that comes off of the arrays. And so it's certainly important to consider the size of the systems as well as the future energy usage of the schools. So, there certainly is some consideration for that. Especially as we get further and further along in this COVID conversation. But one of the things that is helpful in that is that Southern California Edison provides a program called net metering. And what that means is that, if your school is on and everybody's there and you're using energy, then the energy flows directly from your solar array directly to your school. In the event that your school is closed or not operating at full capacity, that energy flows back out to the grid, then SoCal Edison gives you a credit on your bill that you can use off later. And so that's something that's really important to, not just now, but really always for school districts where during at least a portion of the year, a lot of the schools are closed, like during the summer.
Yes.
And then what happens is you accrue a solar credit balance over that period, whether it be the summer or a longer period, that you then have the ability to use those credits later. So we could certainly look at some scenarios and see what would happen, if usage was down over time. But that's also part of the reason that we tend to try to size systems a little bit conservatively. And rather than going to 90 or 100% offset of your usage, we're down around 75%, where there is a little bit more margin there, and we're avoiding a situation where we're overusing. So if you guys would like to see some different scenarios and what that looks like, then our team can definitely provide some of that analysis.
Okay, thank you. Next slide.
Okay, thank you. So as we start to go into some of the numbers, I think it's good to start and look at the long-term view of energy prices in California. So what we've seen going back to 1970, which is as far back as our data goes, is that energy rates in California have increased year over year by about 4.84% per year. So there have been periods and different times of escalation and periods of rate increases and even some periods where they went down. But the long-term trend has been almost 5% per year. And now when we're forecasting costs in the future and forecasting savings, what we've done is we've modeled future Edison rates at 4%, which is below the long-term norm. But that gives us some guidelines in terms of comparing energy prices year over year versus what you would pay through a power purchase. So if you go to the next slide, CJ, in addition to that, in the near term, even since I've started talking with the team here at LoSal, we've seen Southern California Edison come out with 2 rate increases. One to start the year in January 1st, 2020, and then another one in the middle of April, we saw another rate increase. And so depending on which of your schools and which tariff they're on, you can see the January 1 rate increase, there was about a 3% rate increase across the board, followed by a larger rate increase in April of somewhere between 6 and 8%. So even in 2020 alone, we've seen already nearly 8 or 9% rate increase from Southern California Edison already. So we don't necessarily know where rates are going to go in the future, but we do have some guidance from Edison on the long-term side, as well as some of the near-term rate increases. And then you can see here on the slide, they have requested an additional 11% rate increase to start 2021. So this is still going through their rate making process, but they are at least forecasting that they need to increase rates to account for a number of factors, but certainly increased wildfire risk that we've seen throughout the state. And there's a lot of hardware and infrastructure that needs to be implemented in order to harden the grid and try to improve some of the wildfire risk that they have in some of the more remote corners of their service territory. So in addition to rates from Edison, something that's important to consider now is one of the largest incentives available for solar is the investment tax credit. And so that's the ITC. And this is a program where the owner of a solar system can receive a tax credit in the form of 26% of the value of solar. So the district, as a non-tax-paying entity, doesn't take advantage of tax credits, but under a power purchase agreement where we are the owner of the system, we can monetize these tax credits. And what the ITC allows us to do is charge you a lower rate for energy because our upfront cost is lower in part due to the tax credit. So in 2019, the ITC was at 30%, and it had been at 30% since about 2007 when it was first instituted. And then at the end of 2019, it stepped down to 26%. The ITC is currently at 26%. At the end of this year, it steps down again to 22%, and then in 2022, it drops all the way to 10%. So one of the ways that we're able to provide significant savings and provide nice savings over SoCal Edison is through this tax credit. So we're seeing a number of school districts that are trying to move forward with PPAs this year to ensure that they can take advantage of the tax credit at its current level.
And that is one of the reasons that we've been working on this since November. We knew we wouldn't be able to qualify for the 30%, but why we still wanted to do the workshop today was if the board had interest in us moving forward beyond this, we would want to capitalize on yielding as big of the 26% as we could, again, where we won't get it, but they are able to factor that into the rates that you'll see Mike share a little bit later.
That's right.
So that's a 26% one-time credit. And so once you start the production, then you've locked in that credit. Is that correct?
Basically, once we have a contract with the district, then we will go out and start to procure equipment. And then that will allow us to lock in the 26%. So once you guys have done your part in signing the contract, then it's on us to deliver and do everything that we need to do. And we don't have to have the system turned on in 2020, but we have to get started, right? And then the system would likely come on in 2021, but we would still qualify for the 26%.
Right, because most likely it would take us longer to get them installed and to go around to all the school sites to verify the locations, work with the community and the board. But if we had the contract signed, let's say in in June or in July, we would still be able to lock in the rates that they're representing today because of that.
That's correct. Okay, next slide. Thank you, CJ. So an overview of the project. We've got 3 different options that I am showing you today. Over the total term of the PPA, we're looking at savings of somewhere between $9.6 and $14.9 million. In addition to the cost savings, we have improved campus security and safety. So all of the canopies that would be located in the parking lots would have lighting, LED lights underneath canopies to provide additional light on campus. And then in the arrays that are located not in the parking lots, we've worked with the team to try to locate them in areas where the shade would be beneficial to the students. So near areas where the students may line up or eat lunch, or other areas where it would be beneficial to have shade for the students and for the activities around campus. As I mentioned, we have an educational component that comes along with the solar project that I'll talk more about in a little bit later. As a part of the project, we know the community is important. And it's important that we work with the district and the community to make sure the project's a success. So we've done this in a number of different ways at different districts. So for Fullerton School District, for example, we worked with each site staff from each site and held community meetings to get feedback from the community and inform them on what the plan was for the solar project. And so they were aware of what's going on and why the district was doing it the way that they were doing it. So we take kind of a custom approach for each district, but we would certainly look to work with the team at Los Alamitos to make sure that we tailor our approach and incorporate feedback from the community in the way that best fits your district.
Mike, may I ask a question?
Please.
Davidson, I was just curious, what has the feedback been from communities in terms of the structures? Because we just had a big one over a scoreboard. So are people fairly positive about the structures in their communities?
I would say for the most part, we get a lot of positive feedback from the community, right? One, because the district's saving money. Some folks are really excited about solar because of the environmental attributes. And then, the shade to the kids and the educational piece is important. I would say the thing that we are always trying to be cognizant of is specifically to the neighbors that are nearest to the school and nearest to the solar. Are we putting the array in a location that could in some way impede their view or affect them negatively? And so that's something that we've done a lot of work with at your schools, and that we would continue to do that. For example, if we were looking at an elementary school, rather than putting the solar in a grass area right next to someone's house, maybe we would locate that array towards the center of campus, away from the homes that are in the area. And I know there's already been some of that discussion, specifically at the high school, where there's a row of parking that would definitely work for solar, but the guidance was to leave that empty so we have more space between the first row of solar and some of the homes that are back there and may have had some feedback already. So, those are the type of things that we try to do on the design side. It may be optimal from a solar perspective to put it in one area, but from a community feedback and being a good neighbor, it may be better to put it somewhere else. That's something that we definitely look to the staff to provide, and also we can provide some context given we've done this at over 300 schools.
Thank you. Thanks.
Welcome. Next slide, please. Thank you, CJ. So here are the three options that we have been discussing with the staff. So the first option, I'll sort of go column by column, if you will, and then summarize. So the first one is the zero escalation option. So under this option, during the first 5 years of the PPA contract, we would expect cost savings of between $80,000 and $100,000 to the district. Over the life of the agreement, we would expect savings of somewhere between $12 and nearly $15 million in cost savings. In addition to the savings on the utility bill, something that we're offering to new solar school districts because of the declining incentive that I mentioned earlier, the ITC, is we have a savings share that we provide with the district. So we share in some of the benefit of that investment tax credit before it steps down. So once the systems are interconnected, we would actually write a check to the district in the amount of $100,000 if you're able to move forward and take advantage of the tax credit at the current 26%. So that savings, that $100,000 payment would be in addition to the cost savings that we've shown above. So under the capital cost, so under the PPA, there's no capital cost to the district. Under the 0% option, our energy rate would start at $16.40, 16.5 cents per kilowatt hour, and it would not escalate for the entire term of the agreement. So the price you would pay in year 1 would be the same price you would pay in year 30. So going up to the 3% option, what we have here is savings in the first 5 years of between $840 and a little more than $1 million. Total savings over the term is about $9.7 to $12 million, and you still are eligible for the $100,000 savings bonus. No capital costs, as in all options. In this case, your PPA rate would start at about 11.88 cents per kilowatt hour. And then it would escalate, so it would increase annually at 3% per year for the full term, the full 30-year term. So the main difference between these two options is just, is your PPA rate starting lower and then finishing higher, or is it starting higher and then staying flat and finishing lower? So that's where you'll see the 0% option has more savings over the full term, and less savings in the near term, the first 5 years, whereas the 3% option has greater savings in the first 5 years and then fewer savings in the full term because the PPA rate escalates. So the third option that we have is what we call the hybrid escalation option. And under this option, we expect savings during the first 5 years to be about $650,000 to $800,000. And total savings of about $11 to $13 million. An additional $100,000 for the savings bonus. And in this case, the PPA rate would start at about 12.77 cents per kilowatt hour. And we would escalate for the first 15 years of the contract at 3%. And then for the last 15 years of the contract, we would be flat for the no escalation from there. And I have a chart that will show what that looks like in a second. But these are kind of the three different options that we have seen as being popular with school districts. And it sort of comes down to, do you want more savings now or more savings later? And we're certainly happy to provide any of these options to the district and other options the district may be interested in as well, or if we can provide anything that the district would like.
And I just want to remind the board that this is savings on top of, we've already had them factor in the savings that we expect to yield through the battery project. So this is on top of that portion as well.
That's correct. This is the savings only related to the operation of the solar system. And we've got a little more information on how that matches up with the storage system that you guys are implementing now in a couple slides. So under all three options, actually, if you could go back for 1 second, CJ. Under all three options, the configuration There we go. The configuration of the solar would be the same. So we'd be using a combination of parking canopies and elevated shade structures around the campuses. The solar system size is about 3.1 megawatts solar, and we're producing about 4.7 million kilowatt hours. So for perspective, that's about 75% of the usage across your campuses.
And then, Michael, I assume as we go out to the community and as we look at the locations, if we need to pull back some of the areas, and so thus the consumption is less than 75%, the rates still stay the same.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we've always been able, with the different districts we've worked with, to find locations for the arrays, and to, we know the system sizes are going to change a little bit. They may get a little smaller. Sometimes they get a little bit bigger. Yeah. But we've always been able to hold our rate and hold our pricing, even when that kind of stuff happens.
Thank you.
Okay. And this just shows the average rates over time. So the red line you see at the top there, that is your average rate from Southern California Edison, and that's shown escalating at 4% per year, which is a little bit lower than the historical norm. And that's what we've modeled the savings against. So the three lines under the red line, the dark blue line, that's your 0% escalation option, right? You see it starts at the same point where it finishes. And then the yellow line, so that's the second option, which is the 3% escalation. And then the light blue line is your hybrid escalation. And you can see it starts out a little bit lower or a little bit higher than the 3% escalation option. But there at year 15, it stops escalating and flattens out and ultimately ends up lower than the 3% option. And as I mentioned, we've seen districts that have done the flat rate. We've seen districts that have done the hybrid, and we've seen districts that have done the full term escalation. So a lot of it just comes down to each individual district and what the preference is in terms of savings versus flat rate over time.
But either way, even with the zero escalation, the rate seems to be lower than our current rate that we're paying Edison, or at least aligns with that rate. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Question, Mike.
Yes.
Maybe CJ and Nancy, maybe you can jump in. At the high school, I know we put in large battery storage units, and the idea was to store energy during the day. You take it off the grid, take it off Edison, and then be able to pull it back out later. Has that been calculated into these?
Yeah, we've done that.
Yeah, so we have incorporated that into the savings, and I believe in a couple slides we kind of illustrate how the solar panels will be producing electricity while the batteries will be charging.
Storing it.
Yeah,
right.
storing it.
Yes,
and just to be clear, we've done it at all sites, not just the high school.
The nice thing about the solar is if there's any overproduction, the battery can also be able to be stored. So there's two components that they can do that. So with the solar, you can obviously, if there's excess energy, you can sell back, but we also have the capacity to actually store energy at this point. So it will complement the two systems should complement each other. That's the goal.
Right. Okay.
Just to be clear, we've actually done that at all of our school sites, not just the high school, the battery storage.
Yeah, I mean, I just use that as an example. And then will your company come out and will you, to help maximize the production of things, will you come out and clean the panels once a year or as needed, or monitor them as to their performance, or will you just leave them alone and come out and just do, fix it, maintenance if something breaks or something happens?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we typically plan to wash the panels once to twice a year, and we monitor the production of the arrays 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. So we get reports back at a 15-minute intervals, so we can watch the production of the array over time. And we also have on-site weather stations, so we can compare the site weather to the performance of the system to determine if is it just a cloudy month, or is this system underperforming and is there something going on there? And you guys also have a link, and you can view that data as well. So you can see some of the same reporting data that we're seeing, and you can also see that performance. But so we have active and preventative maintenance that we do, including just washing and an annual checkup, and then we also have reactive maintenance that we do if the system is underperforming.
And then Mike, will you square up with Edison once a year, basically, you know, what the whole system's put out at each site with what we gave to Edison, what we used, what Edison, and then will there be let's say, will the credits then come to us, or we'll figure out what else we owe them, or will you just keep that excess if we produce more than we used, or how does that work?
So Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the way it works is we would have two separate invoices, one from PFMG and one from Edison. Is that correct?
That's right. So you would have two bills. So you'll still have the bill to Edison, and then you'll have a separate bill from us. And then on your Edison bill, you'll actually have an account every month that'll show your credits that you've generated over time. So it keeps track, Edison keeps track of your credits there. So you know exactly where you're at every month. And part of what we provide, so part of our responsibility is to handle the interconnection process with Edison to make sure you guys are interconnected successfully and your credits are being accrued. And also as a part of that is we will work with the team at the district to make sure that you guys are in the correct programs on the best tariff to maximize your cost savings. Because we have seen in some cases in the past, you know, for whatever reason, Edison may be slow to process paperwork or may forget to process paperwork. Sometimes it's helpful to have a second set of eyes on that, just to make sure that you guys are in the right programs, you're getting the full value of your credits and saving as much money as you can. But yes, that's a part of our process. And so I think that was a good segue actually to this slide. And this is the analysis that we did comparing the solar plus storage savings to the savings that you guys would expect to see from the storage system alone. So we don't own the solar system. You guys, I'm sorry, we don't own the storage system. You guys own the storage system. So we didn't want to claim any of the savings from your storage in our analysis. So we broke that out. And we also ran an analysis through our tools to see what we would expect your storage system to do and how that compared versus if it had solar, if you had solar accompanied with the storage versus if it was operating by itself. And what you can see here, the first column that says storage only savings is what we would expect your batteries to save you. And we assumed a 20-year life on the storage system. And so in the first year, we expect the batteries would save you about $96,000, $97,000 on the bill. The second column that you can see over there is both storage plus solar and then a total amount. And what you can see is that our tools tell us that the same storage system that you guys have, you guys are implementing now, would actually be expected to save you guys about $113,000 in year one, which is greater than what it would be expected to save on its own. And then you can see in the second column, you've got solar savings. So that adds up to the total amount that was in the previous sheet. And then the total savings is the combination of solar plus storage together, which is even greater. But the key here that we found is that it looks to be that the storage is more efficient and more effective at saving you money when paired with solar because of the way that you use energy on sites and the way that the storage operates. And actually, if you go to the next slide, CJ, we've got a couple of examples why this is.
Just real quickly before we do, just for comparative purposes, this option that Mike is showing is with the hybrid with the 12 cent and then the escalation through of 3% up to about year 15 or whatever.
That's correct. So what you can see here, so the way that batteries, one of the main ways that they save money on your utility bill is reducing what's called your peak demand. So Edison will bill the district based on the maximum amount of energy that you pull over the course of a month. So typically for a school district, that would be on some of your hottest days when the air conditioning is operating at its highest level. So what we have here is this is a time series looking at your energy usage profile over a period of about 4 days in early September. And the dark blue, that is your load profile of the high school. And so you can see in the middle of the day when it's hottest, that is when your peak demand is occurring, right? And Edison is then billing you for September based on that high point. The light blue line is showing what we would expect the battery to do to your peak demand at that time. So the battery waits, it's charged, and then when you get to your peak period, you discharge the battery to drive down that peak, right? And the difference between that dark blue and that light blue is where the battery is producing a significant portion of your cost savings, right? And so this chart shows from our analysis that the battery is fairly effective at reducing your peak demand all by itself. But if you go to the next slide, so this is the same time series, but that green section there, that is the production of the solar system at the high school. So you can see that the solar is producing precisely at the same time that your peak demand is occurring, which makes sense. When the sun's out and it's hot, that's when you guys are driving your air conditioning. It's also when we're producing the most energy from our arrays. So what you can see is that because the solar is producing in the middle of the day when your peak demand is occurring, the battery is able to even more effectively drive down your peak demand. So you see how much lower that blue section is when you combine the solar plus the storage together. So that's one of the reasons that we've seen the storage as being more effective when it's operating in addition to solar. And it's not that surprising. We're seeing a lot of solar plus storage operating together, and many districts are looking at going forward with solar and storage at the same time. So the fact that you guys have done storage and are now pairing it with solar is not, is very much in line with what we've seen among other districts now based on some of the incentive programs that are out there for storage. So what we've got here is a couple more pictures of what these arrays look like. So this is, if you look down at the bottom right, this is from Redondo Beach Unified School District. This is at Paris Middle School. Parents are in the shade there next to the soccer field, enjoying some of the shade at a soccer game. If you go to the next slide, we've got here up in the top left, this is Redondo Beach Unified again. So you can see the kids utilizing the shade there in a grass area kind of squeezed in between the blacktop. Down in the right-hand side, this is Coyote Canyon in Central School District, where we actually have the shade canopy right on the blacktop, so the kids can take advantage of it while they're out there playing. And then if you go one more, CJ, these are then some of the more traditional parking lot arrays that you guys have probably seen around, and like we're proposing at a number of your sites, including the high school, where you're in the parking lot and you are shading the cars. And I think an important part to this is that you can see the columns there are in between the stalls. So our design enables us to make sure that we're not taking away any parking stalls from the site as a part of our project. So there's no gear that needs to go on the ground, and we've placed the arrays in areas where cars can continue to park there as they normally do. As I mentioned, we've got curriculum that comes along with the solar. So we have elementary school, middle school, and high school level curriculum. You can see down in the right-hand corner, this is a solar toolkit that we offer to all of our customers. And it has about 6 different experiments in there that teachers can use to bring into the classroom. And it comes with some curriculum that is next generation science standard that can incorporate both some of the items from the toolkit, as well as some of the monitoring portals that the public will have access to, looking at day over day, year over year production of the system. The curriculum can tie into that and talk about things like math, but also weather, sustainability, and things like that. So in addition to the sort of structured educational curriculum that we have, we also do a lot with the districts that we work with, making presentations, working on internships, showing up at different events where we're asked to come. I've done myself about 10 presentations to Tustin Unified students, talking about solar, explaining to them how it works, answering their questions. So in addition to the standardized curriculum that we have, we're also very open to working with the district and individual teachers or principals that may have ideas about how we can participate. Next slide. And then finally, I mentioned this before, but one of the keys we've seen to the success of the solar projects, and one of the reasons we've been selected at so many districts, is the community support that we look to provide as a part of these projects. And that goes on the education side, but it also goes to working with individual communities and working with the district to make sure that the array locations fit the community and that the public is informed of what's going on. So with 31 districts, we're very involved. We go to all the major school district conferences. We're always involved with different ed foundations and events that are going on in the community with the schools we work with. And that's one of the things we've seen as being a real driver in the success of the solar projects that we've done. So that's all I've got for you guys today. I definitely appreciate your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have for me.
Can you, this is Diana Hill, can you expand a little bit on what you said about Ed Foundations and how you work with them?
Yeah. So basically, the Ed Foundations have different events, and we have provided sponsorship and support to Ed Foundations. We've participated in everything from galas to presentations to golf tournaments. So basically, as these events happen, our team is there both in person, but also to provide support to these Ed Foundations as they need it. So we've also had one-off questions that have come through from different groups. There have been chess clubs and different sports teams that have needed support in different ways, and we've looked to provide support there as well. So we try to be as involved as we can, and as opportunities arrive to participate, then we always look to do that.
I have a question.
Hey, do any other board members have questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it seems too good to be true.
Karen Russell has a question. Karen, you just need to use the mic.
Okay, Doctor. Okay, I am assuming that since I didn't hear anything, I'm assuming that our board members
Madam President,
have
can you hear
had
me?
any questions that they have been answered.
No.
So now, Dr. Pulver, I'm just verifying that you are now looking for direction from the board, which means we tell you how we are leaning. We're not taking a vote or making a final decision. Is that correct?
Actually, before we do, it's harder for you to hear us probably here in the room. Board member Russell has a couple questions or a question.
No problem.
Okay. I had a question regarding do they ever have places where the electrical is going for people to plug in electric cars?
Is the question about the addition of EV chargers?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have done that in a number of places. So I would say districts have looked at this in two different ways. So one way that we can do it is, as a part of our project, we could include some additional conduits, kind of put the plumbing in there for future EV chargers. And then the district can come back later and do the EV chargers themselves. The other option that we have is we could include the cost of EV chargers and the installation of those into our PPA, and we can actually install the chargers as a part of our project. We would then turn those EV chargers over to the district, and you guys would own and operate those EV chargers. And so if there's an interest in doing that, I can certainly provide an option to the district to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions from any other board members?
I have one just quick question. In the year of the plague, what happens in 30 years? We're supposed to have the big one. If there's a natural disaster, who's responsible for fixing it? If there's any damage to the facilities?
Yeah. So well, first, so all of the arrays that we install and all of the carport systems and the shade structures we have are permitted through the Division of State Architect, right? And so they're permitted for the seismic conditions, not just of the state, but of your specific soil conditions at your site. So first step is, we take all precautions and use only equipment that's certified for that. Outside of that, the ownership of the system, we own the system. So if it breaks, then that is our responsibility to fix it or remove it. If it's at a point where it's so bad that it cannot be fixed, then that is all on us. Again, the school doesn't own the system, we own the system, and so we have the liability to do that. And we actually carry insurance on the system to help prevent against anything like that, to prevent it.
Mike, that brings me to another question that I have, because I'm always the guy that always the doomsday, and I'm now she asked about the plague question. What happens if you guys go belly up 20 years from now, or let's say 30 years from now? All these things have turned into, they're glowing in the dark and no one wants to take them. There's too much cadmium. Nobody wants the recycling costs to take them down. If you take them away, it's going to cost more than, so you just go bankrupt and you leave us with these dysfunctional panels. I'm just saying, what happens? Or you go bankrupt halfway through this? Do we then just take it over? Do we then become owners of the system?
So a couple pieces to that. So first, so PFMG Solar, we're owned by a company called Constellation, which is owned by a company called Exelon. So Exelon is a Fortune 70 company with a balance sheet of about $35 billion. So we are, the plan would be for Constellation to be the owner and financier. So from a balance sheet perspective, we are pretty secure. But over the long term, what would happen, and this has happened to other solar companies that have gone bankrupt.
That's why I'm asking.
Yeah. And so what happened to those contracts, those PPA contracts, is the acquirer of the project or of those assets then took over the responsibility of those. So all of those PPAs for some of those solar companies that went bankrupt were acquired by other solar companies, and then they took on the obligation. So all the performance guarantees and all the requirements are written into your contract. So anybody down the road in a worst case situation that would then take on that contract would have the same responsibilities and requirements that we have today. And ultimately what you have is a long-term revenue stream that is pretty attractive to a lot of different investors. So we've seen there's a lot of interest in these types of projects. But that's why it's important that the contract has all the requirements in there, because in the event that it were to go someone else, then you guys are protected.
So Michael, it would be sold off as an asset if that happened, correct? To another company by you guys?
I'm sorry, what was that, CJ?
It would be sold off as an asset to another company as that happened, correct?
That's right. That's right. It would be one of the assets that would come out during a bankruptcy proceeding. And we've seen that these projects are very much in demand. And so in the past, the companies that did go bankrupt, all of their projects found other buyers. In fact, there were a lot of different buyers for those projects. But that's one of the good things about the PFMG structure is that we have a large company and a large balance sheet behind us. So that provides us with the capital that we need to do the projects, and it also provides some long-term certainty to the district about what we can provide.
That was one of the, as I shared with you, Dr. Nien, Mr. Nolan, and myself met with a few companies, and why we were attracted to continue to be with PFMG is because their financier is within the same parent company. So you're not dealing with one company to transaction this, another company who's investing and finding investors, and then another company who's actually doing the installation.
Okay, and I just have one question, which was going in a different direction, the same one that Dave asked. How long has your company been in business, and how long have you been selling solar?
So PFMG has been around since 2009. Our first solar project was interconnected in 2010, and that was the Antelope Valley High School District up in Lancaster and Palmdale. And actually, so the superintendent there, Dr. David Vieira, is still the superintendent there, and he knows us well. And I think as our longest standing customer, he certainly is a good reference, and often people call him to see what we've been like to work with. So PFMG itself has been around for about 10 years, 11 years. Constellation, our parent company, has been around for, I think, closer to 70 or 80 years in different forms.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, are there any other questions from any other board member? Can't see everybody, hearing none. I'm assuming we don't. So again, Dr. Pulver, do you need direction from us? Is that correct?
We would like to get some direction from the board. We've obviously done quite a bit of research on this and held several meetings, wanting to see if this is something that the board would like us to continue exploring, particularly to try to capitalize on the additional savings that could be yielded if we entered into a contract prior to the expiration of the 26% tax credit. And if you do want us, if the board has any insight yet on the three models that I'm still showing on your screen there, the 0%, the 3% for the life of 30 years, and then the hybrid. Because what we could end up doing is we could move, if the board gives us direction, we could continue to explore creating a contract with PFMG and having it approved within the next couple of months. They could come back out and do further workshops about, here are some initial plans at the site locations. And they were even initially thinking, this is back when we had a little more confidence that students and schools would be in session, about coming out to the back to school nights and having a table at the back to school nights, kind of doing some of that parent community engagement process. So the contract itself doesn't lock us into the locations where we place them at the school sites. They still have a lot of flexibility in working with us based upon the decisions that we make and the input we receive.
Okay.
So one, is
Julie?
this, so sorry,
Yes.
I'll try to simplify. One, is this the direction the board would like us to continue exploring and bringing forward a contract within the next month or two to move forward with this for our 9 sites? And then 2, if they do, if at this point they have any direction for us on the 3 different options that we have here, between a 0% fixed cost, which could yield the most savings, not as much upfront, or the 3% ongoing, or the hybrid.
Okay, was that Diana Hills? Did you want to make, okay, please say something.
So to me, something that would be really important would be to get a better feel for how many of these panels at each one of our sites it's going to take to yield us what we need. Because and I'm sure you have a lot of very unique communities, but we have a very unique community, and we have 3 different communities we'd have to communicate with regarding putting in panels. And I don't even have a reference if you're saying, oh, you just put 1 parking lot full, or there'd have to be covered. The site would have to be covered in panels. So something that would help me understand that better. And it doesn't have to, I know it's not exact. I know there can be changes and so on and so forth, but that's something that would help me better feel comfortable about going forward. Like I said, I think it seems reasonable. You've answered so many of our questions to my satisfaction, but I can't even visualize what that means and how many at each site.
We'd be happy to
I
do
think that
another
what Dr.
workshop.
Pulver said is that if we give them direction to go forward, that's when we would actually be seeing the site plans. And I understand what you're saying. I'm getting solar in my house, and it depends on how many panels you have, how much saving you have, and if you can't put enough panels up, there's no point in doing it.
We could actually do both. We have already preliminary designs, for lack of a better word. You're really just looking at Google Earth snapshots of each of the 10 locations, the 9 school sites in the district office, and where our initial, really it's our second, we've gone through this twice, thoughts and some feedback that we had of where to place them. So we certainly could do another board meeting and actually show you physically where they would be at each school site. There are a couple of schools that become difficult, McGaw being one of them, and just the way that the school is laid out and smaller parking lots, et cetera. So we could certainly do that at another workshop. We could set up a separate workshop for that, because that might take a little bit more time, whichever the board pleases.
I'm going to weigh in real quick. I would recommend, my question for him is, let's say we decided on this, do we have to have it at every location? I'm just thinking of, let's say Rossmore gets excited. We can have a smaller setup at each elementary school, and maybe we could take, for instance, McAuliffe, the old railroad tracks there, where we don't really have students. We could maybe line that whole back parking lot full of panels with lots of sun, and maybe maximize it that way. I'm just wondering if that's possible to do.
We can do more.
Do it that way.
We can do more. We can do less within this contract. You never want to produce each site has its own Edison bill, so you don't want to produce more energy at LAE than what LAE will actually use, even though that might be a prime location. At least that was what I initially thought I heard from Mike, but Mike, I'll have you clarify. So that's why we always want to stay. We don't want to have 100% solar, because if you're locked into buying that solar for 30 years and things get more efficient over the course of 30 years, we want to stay within about the 70% range. But let's say we end up deciding, gosh, it's not going to work at 3 schools. We're only going to do 7 of the 10 sites. That could also be an option. I made up set 3 out of a number, obviously.
Well, the other thing I do, because I do have solar and I do have a PPA, so I'm well familiar with this program, and it's been working out very well for me. So the technology's finally caught up and the efficiency's there. I think it makes a lot of sense financially. But like in a place where, like in Rossmore, where you got lots of trees and shade covers, so it's kind of hard to find the sunlight sometimes. But someplace like McAuliffe with the open field, where you get a ton of sunlight, and that's, I leave it to the engineers to figure that. Where the placement is, but I'll leave that up. That's detail. I say
I think that'll help the board.
Let you guys come to us and let's take advantage of this while we can.
And would you rather do the 0 escalation 3% or the hybrid? This is not a final commitment.
I like the first 2. I just think Nancy would like a fixed idea of what she's getting into. What her costs are going to be. I mean, I'll let her run the numbers, but any of those 3 I could live with. I like the lot bigger savings, obviously. So the 0% looks good because we're at the bottom line, and in 30 years in which we save more money. So, okay. But
all right, I'm just, because I see Diana on my screen, I'm going to ask Diana what direction and if you have an escalation preference.
I think we can start to move forward. I do want that other information before we make a final decision. I don't want to sign a contract without knowing what that's going to look like. I mean, where those are going to be and what it's going to look like. And I'm opposite to Dave. I kind of like the hybrid model because there's also the time value of money. And I think we need to look at that money now. And then it would give other, as we went forward, it would also give other boards an understanding of exactly where they'd be. So I'd probably be more of the hybrid model, but I'm not overly connected one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. Marlis?
Okay, so yeah, I agree, go forward. And especially though, with a focus on getting lots of community input. For the schools in Rossmore, I like the idea of being in the center of the fields because, for one thing, you get more sun, but it would be less obstructive to the surrounding community, and plus you could get shade for the kids, which we always have a need for. As far as the money goes, right now I'm so paranoid about what's going on, so I look at the one that gives us the most money now, but realizing that maybe I need to be a little bit more balanced, so I probably go with the hybrid as well.
Okay. Mrs. Russell.
Yes, I'm totally in favor of moving forward on this project, and I agree with the hybrid model. And one of the things, I know that they've already scoped out a lot of the sites to see what kind of structures they're going to do, and I was looking at some of the pictures that they showed today, and as an example, some of our schools have those lunch structures, and they've had to pay, and some of them are getting up there in age. You could have a shade structure for your lunch structure instead of the ones that they have now. So I'm in favor of moving forward and favor the hybrid escalation.
Okay, thank you, Karen. I definitely feel, like I said, we're getting solar panels on our house, so I'm obviously pro-solar, so definitely go ahead. And I'm either the 0% or the hybrid, either one. We're going to be saving money either way. A little bit more long-term with the 0%, but we really don't know that 100% sure because we don't know what Edison's really going to do. So either that or, like I said, the hybrid's good too. So Dr. Pulver, you've got 5 board members who think you should go forward continuing pursuing this. And Mike knows we want to see pictures of the plots of where their panels are going to go. And I think you have direction too on which ones you think would be the best for you as far as the financial consideration. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I just want to add 2 things. The financial savings probably would not be yielded until about 2 years from now by the time everything is installed and you install those at all those at the 9 or possible 10 sites. So I just wanted to keep that in mind. And then what I would recommend, and I can work with Madam President, is to set up another board workshop. We already do have some input of where those locations could be. However, I want to caveat that really was more myself, CJ, Nancy, and having some site visits of PFMG. We have not been able to loop out yet to the school sites, which would be a critical juncture. But at least it would give you all some idea.
And going forward, we will, if we could have a back to school night, that would be an absolutely fabulous time to have this information out there for our parents. So we will have to do communication, and it's something we can do. So no problem.
And so the only thing I wanted to just finally add is the one thing we continue to be mindful of, rather than just putting it smack in the middle of a field, which would give some great shade aspects, we also want to make sure in doing so we don't change the layout of that field. So now that used to be 2 soccer fields, and now you can only get 1 soccer field out of that because now the shade structures are in the way. So there are a lot of things a lot of moving parts that we're trying to address, but I think we've got a lot of those, at least to give. It always helps to see something. So we'll set up another workshop where we can go over those, which would then help us to be able to loop out to sites and the community.
Okay, if there is nothing else that we need to go over, I can say that we are taking a temporary recess and we'll reconvene into open session. Most of us at the boardroom, Diana is being a very good citizen and not coming in, so we can reconvene at 6:30. Is that correct, Dr. Pulver?
That is correct. At this point, we're recessing so that the board can have an opportunity to eat dinner and travel from their location to the boardroom, and we will reconvene the board meeting at our normal time, which is at 6:30.
6:30, because we don't want 5 crabby board members. They're all low blood sugar. Okay, well, I just knocked. We're going into recess. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Mike. We really appreciate your very informative and detailed presentation.
Thank you very much for having me, and look forward to answering your questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you to the staff. Take care.
All right, guys.